Hey everybody, in this video we're going to take a look at fundamentals of transition logic in Unreal Engine 5.7. And yes, by the way, I am inside Unreal Engine's rundown right now, so if I move the rundown window, I move along with it. What's happening here is there is this background level that I have loaded in, and that is receiving video from the decklink board in my computer directly onto a rectangle in that level, and I'm using that right now to be inside rundown. And what I'll demonstrate is some overlay graphics, so for example a corner bug and a bottom bar and a lower third, and each of these is going to demonstrate a different kind of transition logic interaction. So let's take a look at these one at a time. I'm just going to select all the graphics and play those out. And we'll start with the corner bug. This is the most simple transition logic there is. All that this corner bug does is transition in or transition out. So with this page selected, if I preview in, it comes in, and if I preview out, it goes out. Now the corner bug is defined by a template called TL corner bug. It is assigned to its own layer, corner bug layer, and that doesn't interact with any other layers, and we never really change the content. So, with this page selected, there aren't any controllers on it. So if I preview it in, I can leave it there, and it'll just stay there for the rest of this little demonstration. So that's one kind of transition, in and out. Another is a sublayer transition. So we have a layer loaded in, and then there's other pages coming in on that same layer that are based on exactly the same template level, and we just want to change the values that are different between pages, but we want to leave the level in place. So the bottom bar is set up like this. So if I preview in the bottom bar, there's no interaction with the corner bug. But if I look at the next page that uses the exact same template, it's on the same layer, this has different text. So what will happen in this transition logic scenario is when I read in this second page, transition logic will realize that, oh, this is exactly the same template, but the text value of this particular actor is different on the incoming page versus the outgoing page. So we'll do a change out animation, which fades out the text, and we'll do a change in animation, which fades in the new text. Both of these pages have exactly the same color, so nothing will happen to the bar that's in the background itself. So I have my second page selected. I'll preview that in, and we should see the old text fade out and new text fade in. All right, just exactly what we wanted to see. So that is a sublayer transition. So finally, we have a third kind of transition, and that's where two different layers interact with one another. So I have the bottom bar in, and it's occupying most of the bottom of the screen. I also have a lower third template. Now, when a bottom bar is already in place, we need that lower third to be well above the bottom bar so that we have a comfortable arrangement for our graphics. So I have my lower third selected. I'll preview that in, and that should come in and be high enough above the bottom bar that we have a little bit of a gap and everything looks comfortable. Now that we have both of these levels in, one interaction that would happen is that if I take out the bottom bar, I want the lower third bar to descend in the screen so that it takes up more of the lower end. So I'll select my bottom bar page, I'll preview it out, and we should see the lower third drop down. And there we go. Likewise, if we bring in a bottom bar, we're going to need that lower third to pop up out of the way. So I'll go ahead and bring back that bottom bar, and we see the lower third pump up. So that's our third kind of interaction where two different layers need to be aware of one another. And in this case, what's happening is that the lower third level is looking for bottom bar. If bottom bar exists, then it's going to play an animation that moves it out of the way. If bottom bar leaves the display, then the lower third will drop down to occupy that space. The lower third also is set up in a way where if we change its text, it also has a sublayer change. So in this last page here, I have different text for the lower third and also a different color. So if I preview in my second lower third page, both of those transitions will take place. And we have a little bit of a different animation. Instead of fading out the text, we just scroll out the old value and scroll in a new value. All right, so those are the different kinds of interactions we're going to look at. We'll go ahead and do an overview in Unreal Engine of this existing setup, and then after that we'll go step by step from none of this exists to building it up from scratch. So let's go ahead and select all our graphics and play those out. And that just leaves me here, so I will exit and we'll go back into the engine and take a look at how this is all set up. Okay, so here are all the assets that were used in that rundown. Now we have the rundown itself right here, but the first thing to take a look at is the fact that we have this transition logic demo tag collection. So this is a motion design tag collection. This just gives the names for our different layers. So I double click on this, we can see that we have 4 different layers defined: corner bug, bottom bar, lower third, and video BG for video background. You can use any text you want, whatever naming conventions you want to use, and there's no need to have these in any particular order. It's just simply a list of names that we can use as layers. So with that taken care of, I will just point out again that I do have a Blackmagic input. If I double click on this, this is just reading in the input from my Decklink Duo. And then I have this Blackmagic background. If I double click on that, I think, yeah, I'm there again. And all that's happening here is this rectangle has a material designer material, and that material is set up to be emissive with a media source. And that media source is, of course, our Blackmagic input. And the last little bit here is that I did adjust the color with a little bit of levels. And finally, I did apply the holdout composite so that I don't have any temporal anti-aliasing going on that video feed. And that's the entirety of the background, other than if I click this vertical ellipsis button next to the transition logic button for motion design, what I'll see is everything is enabled, reuse, and I have a video background as the layer for this particular level. Of course, while this is popped up, I'm frozen, so let's go back to live. All right, so the next level we'll take a look at is the corner bug. So I'll double click that. And the corner bug just has a pair of sequences. One is the in sequence here, and it has an out sequence. Okay, and there are 2 other sequences defined, and that is mainly because in version 5.7 we now have a lot of transition logic set up for us by default. So these will be added to the level automatically when we activate motion design. Prior to 5.7 and 5.6 and earlier, for example, these sequences were not created automatically, but now they are. So I left these in, even though if I select change in, there's no animation on that, and the same for change out. We'll never need these because we only ever load corner bug in once, and we're not using any remote control controllers to change anything. Again, up here in transition logic, we have enabled and reuse, which, by the way, also in 5.7, these are set automatically for us when we activate motion design, but the corner bug layer name here is something that I set up manually. So that way, when this level gets brought in, it's brought into its own layer called corner bug. I think that's about everything on that one. So now let's take a look at our bottom bar. If I double click on that level, here we have a few extra things going on. So the things that are common with the corner bug is that up here in transition logic, if I click our vertical ellipsis, enabled and reuse, again, those are activated automatically now in Unreal 5.7. And I've gone ahead and assigned this to the bottom bar layer. Now, instead of just 2 sequences, we are actually using all 4 sequences that are set up automatically for us by 5.7. In Unreal 5.6 and earlier, we had to add all of these individually. Now they're automatically there for us. I did add this 5th sequence, by the way, and this sequence has no keyframes, but in this particular sequence, I've gone ahead and lowered the graphics so that we don't see them. And what this does is make sure that the first time this level is loaded as a page, that we don't accidentally reveal the bottom bar. Instead, everything is off screen, and then the in animation plays to bring them into view. So we have an in animation, which raises the bar, and we have an out animation that takes it out. And then we can't really see them, again, because our default location for everything is out of view. But if I look at my change in, all we're doing here is we're fading in our text with opacity 0 at the beginning, and that goes up to 1 so that it reveals that text. And our change out animation starts at an opacity of 1, so it's solid and visible, and then it fades out. So now, in order to trigger these 2 animations, we have to define a sublayer within our level. And to do that, I have a null object here. And if I look at the operator stack, let's open that up, we have a transition logic sublayer blueprint defined. And this basically says that, okay, if any actors underneath this null are changing as a result of remote control from one page to the next, play the out sequence to get the old information out, and then play the in sequence to bring in the new information. And so what will happen is anytime our remote control that operates on text changes from one page to the next, is the modifier here in this group null will detect that change. It'll play the change out, it'll make the change to the value, and then play the change in. So we do want to be careful with how we define these change in, change outs. We just want them to modify whatever actors are changing. And in this case, it's just the text 3D actor. So that's how we define a sublayer interaction. And then the final interaction is when we have one layer responding to the existence of another, and that we have set up here in the lower third. So I'll open that one up. So again, we go to transition logic. It has its own layer. It's enabled in reuse. And we have a few extra sequences. So we do have the default 4 that are created by 5.7, but we also have a bump sequence. So this bump sequence just moves the sequence, just moves the position up. And we can't see anything because we have an empty sequence that's got everything off of screen. That way we don't accidentally reveal the lower third when the layer is brought in for the first time as a page. But if I select the bump animation, it's a bump null. So it's this null right here. And so with its gizmo displayed, if I play this animation, you can see how that bumps up. And if I play it backwards, we can see how it bumps down. So this null is getting moved in response to a bottom bar being present at the same time as a lower third. And so how do we set that up? We use a special window called Scene Settings. So if I go to the window menu, here in our remote control area, we have Scene Settings. This is only going to be visible if you've got motion design on, but if we select Scene Settings, here we can see the setup here. We have states activated. By default, these are actually off. Now if I expand that, now we have an index of 0. We have one element under states. And in this case, we have a layer bottom bar designated. So what will happen with this state is it's keeping an eye out for bottom bar to be on our viewport. And if it is, then we're going to play the bump sequence. We also have the opportunity to define a little bit of delay for the in and the out of that sequence. So that way we can get the timing just right. But the other thing to know is that if bottom bar leaves the view, then we'll just play the bump sequence in reverse. So we'll play forward when a bottom bar gets brought in. We'll play bump in reverse when our bottom bar exits. And that's really the entire setup. I will just point out that every one of these graphics levels is making use of what I called a common level. So this one level here, and here it is in our content browser, TL Common, this is what has our camera and lights. And I reuse this as a sub-level with all of the graphics levels, so they're all being viewed through the same camera and using the same lighting. And that way we don't see any pops in the lighting or any movement with the camera. All right, so that's the overview. Let's get rid of all of these levels and our tags and really build them up from scratch. I have some of my materials already set up, so we'll reuse those. But for now, we're going to start building up our levels and our tag collection from scratch. Okay, so with the previous setup cleared out, the rest of this video is really just for anyone who would like to see a full step-by-step walkthrough as to how that was built. So the first thing we're going to need to do is create a set of layer tags that identify the different layers that our graphics are going to land on. So I'm going to right-click in my content browser, go to Motion Design, and select the Motion Design tag collection. This will create the asset for me. I'll name it Demo Layer Tags. Hit Enter, Control S to save, and double-click to open it up. Now here I'm only going to need 3 tags, so I'm going to click the plus button 3 times. Click, click, click. And the different names will be, one will be the corner bug. I will also have a bottom bar and a lower third. Now these can be any names you like. You can use any naming convention you want. The order doesn't matter. The only thing that matters is that each layer is going to have a unique name from the others. So I'll save this and close it. That's ready to go. And now I'll create my first level. The first level that I'm going to create is going to be a common level. It'll have the camera and lighting that I use in all of the actual graphics template levels. So I'll right click in my content browser, choose level, and name this Demo Common LVL, enter, Control S to save, and double click to open this up. Okay, so that level is open. I'll activate motion design and then create defaults. Now I usually don't use the directional light, so I'm going to uncheck that, but I'll keep skylight, post-process volume, and the cine camera actor. We'll spawn those and Control Shift S to save, and this is ready to use. So let's create our first graphic level. It'll be the corner bug, and I'll show how to use this common level. So in the content browser, right click, level, we'll call this Demo Corner Bug, LVL, enter, Control S to save, and double click to open it up. All right, first I'll activate motion design, and then I'm going to assign the transition logic layer that this belongs to. I'm going to click this vertical ellipsis button. Now, Unreal 5.7 automatically enables transition logic for us and also sets the mode to reuse. And this is fine for most levels. I'm going to keep those. If you're using an earlier version of Unreal Engine, this all is still applicable, but you're going to manually need to activate the transition logic as well as set the mode to reuse. Okay, now for the layer, I want to use my list of layer tags, so I'm going to click on the layer tag asset here and choose the demo layer tags that I created just a moment ago, and then I'll assign corner bug as being the layer for this level. Great, clicking away from that, Control Shift S to save those changes. Next, I want to add my common assets, and I use this levels window to do that. Now this window usually isn't displayed by default, so I'm just going to pull this out and close it and show where you can find that. It's under the window menu, and about halfway down we have this levels window. So I'll activate it again, and then I like to keep it docked with the outliners, so I'm just going to drag and drop that over here. And we just see bold blue persistent level. And persistent level refers to the level we currently have open, Demo Corner Bug. Now I want to add the common level, so I'll go to the content browser and find my common level, and I'm just going to click and drag it in and release. So now this common level is what's called a sub-level of our persistent level corner bug. The only issue right now is that this is currently the active level, so it's highlighted in blue, it's bold. This means that any actors that I add to the viewport are actually going to get added to the common level, which is not what I want. I just want the common level to stay as it is so I can reuse it across all the different graphics. So what I'll do is double click on persistent level, and now that is again the active level, and we can see that it's bold, it's blue, and anything I add to the viewport now will go into Demo Corner Bug, which is the persistent level. So let's go to Control Shift S to save all our changes. I'll switch from selection mode to motion design mode, and then make sure that the camera setting is looking through the Ava Cine camera that is in this common level. If I go to the motion design outliner, here we can see that there are the two levels. The demo common has our default scene, and persistent level has this layer 1 content null. This is just a grouping actor that's automatically added by Unreal 5.7. If you're using an earlier version, this isn't created by default, but in 5.7 it's already here, and we'll make use of that. So for the corner bug, I'm just going to use a regular polygon. I'll just double click on the regular polygon button. That gives us this, and I'll go to details to change the shape to a 6-sided hexagon. So sides is going to go from 5 to 6, enter. And then I will drag drop this polygon under my content null. And finally, now that it's there, I can reposition it to where I would like it to land in my layout. So I'm just going to click and drag this into position up here. And finally, I'll go to my content browser and use a previously created material for this polygon. Just drag and drop that on. And now I've got, creative little corner bug. All right, Control Shift S to save all those changes. Now the advantage of having this polygon underneath this null is that I can change this graphics anytime I want. I can modify it, alter it, add animations to it, whatever. And I can use the layer 1 content null as the object that I actually animate in my take in and take out animations, and that way any graphics changes I have later on will just go along for the ride. So let's go into sequencer, and currently in the motion design page I have in selected, so this is my take in animation. So I want this layer 1 content to land about where it is now, so I'm just going to go to frame 30 and set a keyframe for that, and then go to the beginning of the animation and just slide this out of frame to the left. And I have auto key on, so that automatically keyed for me, but I'm going to go ahead and click the key button so that we have consistent keying across all 3 axes. And finally, I want this to play out a little snappier. Right? If I play this right now, it's just kind of boring. So what I'll do is select these 2 keys, and then in my selection page, I'm going to choose one of these curve profiles. I'm going to use exponential right here, so it snaps in and slows to a stop. So there we go, exponential. And I'll also take the end of the sequence, set it to just after my last keyframe, and now this should play out a little snappier. Okay, great. Let's get our out animation going. We'll select our motion design page, choose the out animation. Where we are right now is perfect for the start of that, so this location for the layer 1 content, key that, and then at about frame 30, we'll go ahead and slide that off screen and key that. I'll set the end of my animation and select my keys so that I can use the selection page to set this to exponential in the other direction. So this time it's going to be slow takeoff and then snap away. So we should see that. And perfect. Okay, Control-Shift-S, and really that's all I need to do for this demo in terms of setting up this particular level. We can test it out. I'll go into the content browser, right-click, go to Motion Design, and we'll create a rundown to test this in. So I'm choosing Motion Design Rundown, and I'll call this Demo Rundown. Very creative of me. Control-S, and double-click to open. And then I will take this corner bug, and actually I'm just going to drag it directly to Pages. And what that'll do is bring the actual level in as a template, as well as create a page for it. So now we can see that it is in the corner bug layer, and I can preview it in. It should snap in, and I can preview it out, and out it goes. So that's ready to use. Control-Shift-S. Now we can make our next graphic layer, and that'll be the bottom bar. So I'll right-click and create a new level. I'll call it Demo Bottom Bar, LVL, Enter, Control-S to save, and double-click to open it up. Again, we'll activate Motion Design, and then we'll go to the vertical ellipsis button to set our layer. This time we're going to use bottom bar, so I select the asset first, Demo Layer Tags, and then bottom bar. All right, Control-Shift-S saves our changes. And finally, we need to add our common level. So let's get our levels window open. And let's see here. Here's our common level. Drag and drop. Double click on persistent. We can switch from selection mode to motion design. And finally, make sure we're looking through the correct camera. Control-Shift-S. And let's add some graphics. I'll double click on the rectangle. Add that. Let's use the align tools right now. It could be set to actors or screen, doesn't matter. I'm just going to go full screen with this. And then I'll move this down so that the top here is kind of at the base of my title safe area. So we'll just pull this down. Let's actually go to the details, and we can just use this slider. And that looks nice. Let's see, what are we going to do next? Let's just add a little bit of rounding corners to that. And then in our motion design outliner, we'll make this a child of the layer 1 content null. And then I'll apply my material. So content browser, bottom bar material. Okay. Now we'll want to overlay some text. So let's Control-Shift-S to save our changes so far, and click on actors. Double click on our text actor. We'll center that text on both axes. And let's just make that bold and italic. And we'll drag this down to go with the bar. And okay, a little bit of an issue. We're not seeing the text. It's showing up behind the bar. And there's 2 things that we need to do to adjust this. One is that we're going to use translucent sort priority as a modifier on our group actors so that we can make sure we define which actors are going to be drawn in front of others. So I'll click on the layer 1 content, go to operator stack, and add modifiers. I'll choose translucent sort priority, and now we're set up so that actors towards the bottom of the outliner should appear in front of actors higher up on the outliner. This is in keeping with typical broadcast software. If you're accustomed to using things like Photoshop and After Effects, you can switch this to top first, which is probably something that you're more familiar with. But for now, I'm going to just go ahead and keep the broadcast standard of bottom first. Okay, now I could drag the text into the rectangle, and now it's a child of the rectangle, but it's still not appearing while it is below the rectangle in the outliner. And the reason is that by default, text actors are not translucent, so they're not really adhering to the translucent sort priority rules. To address that, we'll go to Details, scroll down to the materials for our text actor, and change the blend mode from opaque to translucent. And that fixes it. So now it is a translucent actor. It will adhere to our operator stack translucent sort priority applied to this layer 1 content. I'll just select our text and scale it so it looks a little bit better in terms of proportions, and that's still selected, so I'll just move that there. And since it's a child of the rectangle, it'll travel with it. And let's set up our animation just for taking in and taking out for now. So sequencer, I've got my in animation selected, so about 30 frames in here. This is exactly where we want it to land. Again, like the corner bug, we'll apply our animations for in and out to this layer 1 content actor. So location, keyframe, and then beginning of the animation. Let's just drop that out of view. I'll just say -150, key that, set the end of our animation, and let's just stylize this a little bit. I'm going to select the keys, go to my selection panel, and we're going to use this back option for this profile. So it'll kind of overshoot and then drop back into place. There we go. All right, and let's get our out animation. So we'll go to the motion design panel, choose out. And we want it to start here. Excellent. So we'll key this. And then about 30 frames in, we'll have it exit. Here we go. I think we did -150. We'll key that, set the end of our animation, and select our keys and stylize it with that back profile, but we'll just do that in reverse. So this way it'll pop up and then exit. So let's take a look at that. Wonderful. Control-Shift-S. Let's see, double checking, we did set our layer. So now we want to set up our sublayer animation, or our sublayer change in, change out. So you might have noticed when I was setting up our translucent sort priority here in our layer 1 content, there was already a modifier in place. So again, with 5.7, we're getting this added automatically. And what this is doing is saying that, okay, any actor that is under this null is going to get evaluated in rundown whenever we have 2 pages that are, one is coming in, one is going out, and they use the same template. If any of the actors under this one is having a change to a property value through the remote controllers in rundown, then we're going to play an out sequence to get the old page out. Then we'll play the change in sequence to bring the new page in. And so we're going to set up these animations so that they fade the text out and fade the text in. To do that, I'll go ahead and go to my motion design panel. We'll start with the change in. For change in, we want to end up with solid text. So I'll just go here about 29 frames, select our text, go to details, scroll to the material, and I'll key opacity at 1. And then at the beginning of the animation, because we are on change in, we'll start with the opacity at 0. And now we've got that keyed, and we don't need to stylize that at all. And then we'll do the reverse for change out. So select change out. It's currently 100% visible. So at the beginning, we'll key at opacity 1, and then we'll make sure we fade out to 0, set the end of our animation, and that is our change in, change out. Control-Shift-S. So this should be set up to work, except that we haven't actually added the property of our text to our remote control. So remote control is empty. So with the text actor selected, I'm going to go ahead and add that remote control button, activate that. Here is the property. We'll drag the property over to controllers, and now that creates a new controller bind. So this controller can be changed to change our text value from page to page. And again, if we're going to have one page coming in with a new text value versus a previous one, we'll use the change in, change out. So let's test it all out. Control-Shift-S to save our changes. Content browser will activate our demo rundown, double click. I'll take my demo bottom level, drop that in as a page, and then I'll take this page and duplicate it, Control-D, and then I'll change the text value here and just say this is different. Control-Shift-S, save all our changes. So we can bring in our corner bug, that's all fine, that doesn't interact with anything. I can bring in my first page with the bottom bar, that does our pop in. I can pop it out, pop it in again. But if I now play my next page and it is the same template but it has different text, we should see the change in, change out animation play. It'll fade out the text for change out and then fade in the text for change in. Preview next. Perfect. Now there is one more thing to know. Let me just play everything out. So no pages selected, preview out, everything exits, close this, Control-Shift-S. If we want to change the color of the rectangle in our bottom bar, that rectangle is currently under our layer 1 content. So it could be that we change the color of the bar without changing the text. And in our current arrangement, what will happen is that the rectangle will change color, but the text will also fade out and fade in, which will look kind of silly with our single same text, with the text being the same for both. So what I'll do is make a new group null just for the text actor. So Control-G to group that. And then this I'm going to rename as being the text group. I'm typing F2 and typing in text group. And then in this case, I actually only want to play my change in, change out when the text is being changed, not when the rectangle is changed. So I'll go to my layer 1 content, go to the operator stack, and I'm going to go ahead and delete this sublayer transition logic. So delete that. And now when the rectangle changes colors, it's not going to cause any animations to play. And for the text group, though, I will add a modifier, and that will be, again, our transition logic sublayer. So I click on that. We just need to set our sequences. So we'll use change in and change out. And now Control-Shift-S, that is ready to go. So let's set up our rectangle for color changes. I'll select the rectangle, go to details, and let's edit with Material Designer. I've got this positioned the way I like. What I'm going to do is spin this off into a material instance that's unique to this actor. So there we go. And then under emissive color, I'm going to expose each of these colors to remote control. So they're all set to the same color. So this control and this color and this color. So now under remote control, we've got all 3 colors. I'll go ahead and close this and take our first color, drag and drop that into the controller. And now this should have a bind to that first color. And now with bind selected, I can drag these other 2 colors into this same controller. So color 1 and color 2 as well. And so now all 3 of those colors will change by virtue of a single controller. So let's set this back to kind of our darker bluish greenish. Yeah, there, something like that. That wasn't quite what we had, but let's just make it a dark blue. Okay, we're good. So Control-Shift-S to save all of that. And now we can change the rectangle color without fading in the text and fading it out. So let's test that in our existing rundown. Double click to open the rundown. Just to make sure I've got the latest version of this level in my pages, I'm going to select these 2 pages, right click, and re-import. Now let's make sure we have a copy of this first page, Control-D, and I'm going to sequence these so that we have 2 back-to-back pages with exactly the same text, but this second page is going to be a different color. Let's just say green. This one controller is changing the color of all 3 of our properties in our material. We should get a nice color change and not have the text fade in, fade out, because we have the same text value in both of these pages. So preview in, we've got blue. Preview next, we should change to green without fading our text. Wonderful. And if I preview next, we should fade out the text, change color, and fade in new text. Perfect. So there we go. We've got our sublayer transition logic working. Control-Shift-S to save all our changes. Let's play everything out and close our rundown. And then there's just one last level to build, and that is our lower third. So right-click, create a new level, and we'll call this Demo Lower Third. LVL, enter, Control-S to save, double-click to open. Activate Motion Design. We'll set our layer for transition logic, so select our demo layer tag asset, and this will be lower third. And then we'll add our common camera and lighting. So I've got my levels page open here, and here's my demo common. Drop that in, double click on persistent, switch to motion design, and finally make sure we're looking through the correct camera. Okay, Control-Shift-S. Let's create a lower third bar, double click on a rectangle. I will go ahead and just parent that to the default layer 1 content. And let's just adjust this in terms of size a little bit. I've got my mesh size unlocked, so I can make this a little bit wider. Let's just make a 20-degree slant on either side. A little bit of bevel, that's fine. Let's do 20 here. Okay, and maybe not quite as tall. Maybe not quite as much on our curve. Okay. Let's position this right about here. So this is where we want it to land when we don't have a bottom bar. And I have a material ready for this. So let's see here. Here it is, the lower third material. I should be able to drag and drop that on there. There we go. Okay, Control-Shift-S to save all of our changes. And of course, we're going to need a little bit of text for this. So go to the actors, double click on text actor. We'll make that a child of the rectangle. We'll just make this bold and we'll force it to be uppercase. We'll go ahead and center and finally position it at 0, 0, 0 so it matches the rectangle location. Of course, this needs translucent sort priority. So let's first set our material from opaque to translucent. That gets us part of the way there, but then under our layer 1 content, we'll go to operator stack and add our translucent sort priority. Excellent. We'll scale our text appropriately. And we are good to go. Let's go to remote control. We'll expose our text to remote control. And then for our rectangle material, let's go ahead, edit material. We'll spin that off as a new instance, and then we'll expose the emissive color just like before. So remote control, remote control, remote control. There they are. All right, let's close this. Control-Shift-S to save our changes. We'll bring our text in, and then we'll bring our first color in, and then we'll finish by making sure we have bind selected so we can see what we've got bound to this controller, and add our other two colors to that controller. And now we should be able to select our color, make it a nice dark blue. Wonderful. Okay, Control-Shift-S. And let's see, we've got our remote controls, we've got our layer. We need to do our animations. So let's go ahead to sequencer. Our in animation should bring this in from underneath our view. So we've got in selected. Let's go ahead and position our playback head at about 30 frames in. And our null actor will end up right about here. And at the beginning of the animation, we want this out of view. So let's knock this down to -200 and key that. Set the end of our animation. And let's make this a little snappy. So selection, we'll choose this Quartic profile. Okay, and let's do that for our out animation. We are in the right spot already, so we will key this. And then we'll go ahead to frame 30, knock this down to, I think it was -200. And key that. Set the end of our animation. And select our keys so we can go and set a reverse Quartic. All right. Perfect. Finally, we want our change in, change out. So we'll go to change in here. And for our text actor, we will end up being solid. So frame 30 here, translucent, key opacity at 1. We'll go to the beginning. We're changing this in. So we start with transparent and make sure that's fully keyed. And we will set our end. And let's get our out animation. We start with the out animation being fully visible. So again, text actor selected, key a value of 1 at the beginning. And let's just fade that out to 0. Set the end of our animation and Control-Shift-S. Then just like with our bottom bar, one of the things that we want to do here is set a new group just for the text so that we can change the text independent of the color of the rectangle. So with text selected, Control G, now we've got a group actor for that. I'll F2, text, GRP. And for this group, we'll add a sublayer modifier and use change in and change out. And then that is a bit redundant if we leave it up here. So for our previous group, we'll just delete that. Okay, so now the basic changes, animations are all done for us. Control-Shift-S. Now what we really want to get to is responding to the appearance of a bottom bar. And so that we use the scene settings window. So I'm going to close this so I can show you where that comes from. It's usually not open by default. We go to the window menu and choose scene settings right here. This will be displayed when you have motion design active. So scene settings. Here we're going to activate states, and each state is basically a reaction to a different layer being brought into our viewport. So I will add a new state, and the layer that we're going to respond to in this case is the bottom bar. So I need to select the asset for where my layer names are. So I'll go ahead and choose my demo layer tags, and I'm going to choose the bottom bar. That's what we're going to respond to here. Now we need to define a sequence that we're going to run if bottom bar enters the display. So we're working on a scenario where the lower third is in place and a bottom bar comes in. So for this, I'm going to create a new sequence. So I'll open up my motion design page, add a sequence, new sequence, and I'll select this F2 and name this bump. Now this bump will start with the layer exactly where it is, and then we need to bump it up. Also, we have another possible scenario, and that is the bottom bar already exists. We play our in sequence and our bump sequence at the same time. And as a result, I don't want to keyframe my bump sequence with the same exact actor that I have keys on for my in sequence. Otherwise, our different keys will basically stomp on each other. So for this, I'm going to create one more group. So I'm selecting the original layer 1 content group and Control G to create another group above that. And I'm just going to select that, press F2, and I'm going to call this bump GRP, and Control-Shift-S to save those changes. And so now I'm going to animate this bump group. And that way, if we take in our lower third and the bottom bar is already in place, we can play both the bump animation as well as the in animation, and they'll just stack on top of each other instead of stepping on one another. All right, so bump group is selected. I'll go to the details, and this is where we want it to start at the beginning of a bump. So I'm going to key this, and then I'll just give it 30 frames to go ahead and bump up a little bit. So I'm just going to click and give us a little bit of a gap. We know that our bottom bar will come up to the title safe area, and that's it for that animation. Let me just key all of my axes and make sure the end of this animation is nice and tight to the last key. And finally, I might stylize this a little bit, maybe just give it a little bit of drag going in. So I will just set this to exponential going in. This animation's ready to go. That's right. So the thing to know about these scene settings is we're only designating a single sequence. So if a bottom bar leaves the frame, we're just going to play this sequence in reverse. Bottom bar comes in, we play forward. If the bottom bar leaves, we play it in reverse. We'll go ahead and choose the bump sequence to be played when bottom bar comes in. And that's how we set up our interaction. Let's test it out. Control-Shift-S to save our changes. I will go to my content browser, double click on Rundown. Let's drag in our lower third as a page. And finally, we'll play in our lower third. And now let's play in a bottom bar. There we go. We popped up and preview out. Okay, so when we played out, if I bring that bottom bar in again, our lower third is actually kind of colliding with our bottom bar when we take the bottom bar out. So what I want to do is add a little bit of delay to the animation on the lower third, and we can do that over here. I still have the lower third level open. This is our state tree for our scene settings, and so for the out delay, let me just set this to like a half second, 0.5. Enter. Control-Shift-S to save changes. Let's play our level out and right-click and re-import that page. So now we have the latest, greatest version. Preview in, bring in a bottom bar, and now preview the bottom bar out. And there we go. We get some nice delay there. Preview in. Okay, so now also our lower third kind of telegraphs that the bottom bar is coming in. It's moving, it's jumping a little early. So let's add a half second of delay on that. Let's say, 0.5. Let's see what we get. Control-Shift-S, saved all our changes. Let's play everything out. Reload our lower third, re-import page, preview in, bottom bar. Let's see how this looks. Okay, too much delay. 0.25, Control-Shift-S, play everybody out. We should be good now. Re-import, play in, and bottom bar. Nice. So now they're working together. Of course, we do have our sublayer animation for the lower third, so I can duplicate this page. Let's go ahead and change this to new, lower third, enter. There we go. Double click on this page. There we go. So now we can transition back and forth between those with fading text. And, we still also have the color that we could change if we wanted to. So that is all those interactions. That's how to build them up from scratch and then use them in Rundown. I hope this helps. Until next time, have fun.